Well, if you recall, Puka Nacua burst onto the scene during his rookie campaign and became quickly a must-start across fantasy leagues. He was drafted as the 90th receiver taken, and after a near 1,500-yard season in L.A., finished as wide receiver 4 in 2023. The biggest question heading into year 2 for the wideout is, will he be able to follow up with an encore performance, or was year 1 an anomaly? And we now bring in CBS Sports fantasy football analyst Adam Aizer. As if I knew then what I knew now, I think I wouldn't have been on the outside looking in during last year's fantasy playoffs. But hey, like they say, hindsight's 20/20, right? And Puka Nacua being one of those that maybe have been overlooked early in the earlier parts of last year and finishing as one of the best ads during last season. But every year we find some of those gems that outperform their expectations. But Adam, who would you say is a sleeper wideout to target ahead of fantasy drafts?
Sleeper wide receiver, not going to be as good as Puka Nacua, but I'm going to say Josh Palmer is a sleeper wide receiver. So the training camp reports indicated that Palmer was the #1 wide receiver for the Chargers basically this entire offseason. He's going to be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. Last 2 seasons, he played a pretty big chunk of games without both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And in those games, he averaged more than 7 targets per game. He averaged double-digit fantasy points. Josh Palmer is not even a top 50 wide receiver in average draft position right now. That is criminal. It is a steal, and he's going even later because of Justin Herbert's injury, but Justin Herbert is going to be fine for week 1. So if you need wide receiver depth, he's a really good wide receiver 4 or 5, Josh Palmer.
Yeah, looking at their depth chart, sitting at #1 comfortably there with Ladd and McConkey. So definitely an easy grab, as you say, not even a top 50 wide receiver. But how about arguably the most important position in fantasy football? I'm talking running back. There's the CMCs, the Bijan Robinsons, but we'll likely see the big names coming off that board very early. But who are some of those gems that might help fantasy managers in the later rounds?
Yeah, I didn't know where you were going to go with that. Most important, but I'm glad. I agree. Running back is difficult. It is obviously super important. If you can get a running back, a successful running back late in the draft, you have a big advantage. I'm going to go with Rico Dowdle. Basically, it's this. Ezekiel Elliott, I think he averaged 3.5 yards per carry last season. His longest run was 17 yards. He just doesn't look like he's capable of doing it anymore. Rico Dowdle, by all indications, was the best running back for the Cowboys during camp. Now, this is a guy who's got barely any tread on his tires, barely any work that we can use to say, oh, this is how good he is. He's been hurt a lot, but he, by all indications, was the best running back for the Cowboys, and they scored the most points in the NFL last year. So this is an amazing opportunity for a guy. If he weren't on the Cowboys, some mediocre offense or something, I wouldn't care. But there's just such an opportunity for him to score some points and beat out Ezekiel Elliott. I don't think it's going to be that hard to do. He's not going to have the goal line work early. I know that. I just think that as the season progresses, we will see more and more Rico Dowdle, less Zeke, and you could have an automatic start at RB2 at some point.
You just look at Ezekiel Elliott's yards per carry, and since 2021, they're just steadily dropping. And like you mentioned, 3.5 yards per carry last year, definitely an opportunity for Rico to step up this season. But let's move on to the tight end position, where last year we got to see a lot of names emerge behind those Kelce's, Kittles, and Andrews of the world. But where can we find the Sam Laportas of 2024?
Yeah, you can't find. There's no chance. I absolutely hate tight end depth this year. I like tight end, the top 10 especially, top 9 I'd say. Top 12 is fine. I really don't want to wait too long for tight end. It is a big priority for me this year to get a top 9 tight end, which would end with Jake Ferguson. But if you cannot do that, I would go with Pat Freiermuth as a sleeper. I like David Njoku, you're going to see on there. I like Njoku better than Freiermuth, but if you miss on the top 12, Pat Freiermuth would be the guy. Listen, you want a tight end that is first or second on his team in targets. Last season, each of the top 10 tight ends in PPR were first or second on their team in targets. Over the last 8 seasons, there have only been 3 tight ends who have finished top 5 in PPR that weren't first or second on their team in targets. This is the most important stat for tight ends. Pat Freiermuth, of all those late round picks, I think he has the best chance to be first or second, probably second on his team in targets. Arthur Smith's teams use the tight end a lot. There is some appeal to Pat Freiermuth, but I would prioritize a top 9 guy this year.
Yeah, saying the tight end this year, a big priority when you're in your drafts. But I want to move on to that one position that's almost certain to start a debate on when and where they're drafted. Kicker. I'm just kidding. I'm actually talking about the quarterback position. Okay, let's say you've got your signal caller, but you're looking for a sneaky good backup to stash on your roster, or maybe you missed out on the QB sweepstakes and you're trying to find a late pick that can maybe outperform their expectations. Who was that QB sleeper that you would eye, Adam?
Yeah, it's Caleb Williams for me. And one of the ways that I can get a top 9 tight end and still feel good about running backs and wide receivers is by waiting at quarterback. Caleb Williams is the perfect player to wait for. I looked at 3 different websites and their ADP, including CBS. He's QB 14 or 15 still. And that's coming off a really impressive preseason, although I'd say preseason week 2 was a little bit rocky for the Bears offense. But you saw that potential with that throw to Rome Odunze. We love his weapons. In 2 of 3 seasons in college, he rushed for 380 or more yards. In 2 of 3 seasons in college, he scored 10 or 11 rushing touchdowns. Fairly bold prediction. I think he could lead the Bears in rushing touchdowns this season with maybe 6 or 7, something like that. And I think he's going to throw the ball a lot, and I think he's going to throw it well. He's a terrific player. Now, with Caleb Williams, you can draft him as QB 15. Take him with Brock Purdy, with Jared Goff, with Tua Tagovailoa. Have an established veteran for some safety and huge upside with Caleb Williams. He's my sleeper. I just want to give one more name because if you're like, oh, I'm in a shallow league, whatever, or I'm in a deep league, Caleb Williams is not a sleeper. How about Gardner Minshew? He's had 3 seasons with 8 or more starts. Gardner Minshew's finished top 18 per game in 2 of those 3 seasons. So he could be a deep league sleeper. Shallow league sleeper is Caleb.
Ooh, that's really good. A lot of upside. You mentioned his weapons, one on offense, and he has plenty of them. You talk about his rushing ability, what he did in college with rushing touchdowns, the potential to lead Chicago in rushing touchdowns. That's certainly a reason to look at him as a sleeper, or maybe not as you're doing your drafts, maybe even a little earlier. I'll let someone else decide that. But, Adam, it's time to dig deep. We're in the final rounds of our draft. Our roster's starting to take shape, but we're still looking for some good value. Maybe many people are overlooking. Give me that deep sleeper I could stash on my roster for a rainy day, or, hey, who knows, maybe a surprising performance moves them up on my game day roster.
Yeah, I hope you're drafting soon because I think Jalil McLaughlin could be a riser. Jalil McLaughlin for the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton likes to use multiple running backs. The Broncos last year had the 2nd most targets to running backs in the NFL. And if you think about Sean Payton, that's basically been his career, right, with the New Orleans Saints and then with the Denver Broncos. So I see maybe 30 catch, 40 catch potential for McLaughlin. He's more explosive than Javonte Williams, and he is a handcuff. Okay, so people take handcuffs earlier than that. They take Blake Corum much earlier than Jalil McLaughlin. They take Trey Benson. I don't think these guys are going to have very big roles unless there's an injury to their starter. McLaughlin, on the other hand, is definitely going to play. He could be a bye-week flex option if nothing happens to Javonte. If Javonte gets hurt, then you have the starter, I think, for the Denver Broncos. It's a little unclear, so it's a bit of a risk. But I would say that there's a chance he could beat out Javonte Williams because McLaughlin looks to be the more explosive player. Obviously, I'd take Javonte earlier, but McLaughlin's almost an afterthought right now, and he could be your last pick.
Ooh, an afterthought that could certainly help boost your roster. I would like that a lot. But, Adam, listen, you've been covering fantasy football for a number of years, and it's almost you've seen just about everything. You've seen players with the highest expectations being the biggest bust, guys who no one expected to do much being the biggest pickups of the year. But how about the most important factor when it comes to building your roster? I'm talking about draft order. Take a look at what the Oakland A's did on Tuesday. From the upper deck, several guys threw baseballs to a target on the field to end up the nearest to determine their draft order. And it looks like relief pitcher Scott Alexander got the first overall pick. If you can check out his reaction right here. This is some pretty clever stuff right here. So, Adam, I got to ask you, what's maybe some of the wildest ways you've seen draft orders determined, or do you do anything out of the norm we should know about?
Ooh, sometimes I hit that randomized draft order button twice in my leagues just to get a little crazy. I am such a boring fantasy football drafter. I just randomize it. But I would love to do something clever. I've seen people do NFL combines, basically, where they run the 40 and do some jumping and things like that. One of my favorite things, it's obviously too late to do it now, but the Kentucky Derby or any of the big horse races, you pick a horse and however your horse's finish is how you determine your draft order. I don't have any great advice. I've seen some funny ones. I think the NFL Combine style is really cool. But I would say if you're asking me, where do you want to draft if you get to pick your spot? I think somewhere in the 6, 7, 8 range. I would just say 8th overall would be my favorite spot to draft this year.
Okay, wait, now I got to ask you. Let's say you're in a 12-man league. You're doing the NFL Combine strategy. You're doing the 40-yard dash, Adam. Where would you be picking?
Yeah, well, I'm probably going to finish last, so I wouldn't really have much of a choice. But yeah, if I won, I do like the 6, 7, 8 range, because I think in the second round, you're going to end up with Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne, Isaiah Pacheco, someone like that at running back. And so you can take a wide receiver like Chase Jefferson or St. Brown with your first pick. I'm actually doing a draft right now where I had the 6th pick. It's a slow draft. My first 4 picks were Jamar Chase, Travis Etienne, Deebo Samuel, Josh Allen, and I think I just took Amari Cooper. So I like picking in the middle of the first round, but I will never do. That's the thing. I'm not going to do a 40 because I'm not going to be able to pick a good spot. I'm going to end up with the last pick every time.
I think you're not giving yourself enough credit here. But by the way, if you're doing this draft while you're talking to us, this is some impressive stuff. This is why you are CBS Sports fantasy football analyst, Adam Aizer. Appreciate you stopping by. That's fantastic stuff.
Thank you.
And if you want to win your league, make sure to check out the Fantasy Football Today podcast. On the latest episode, Adam and the crew break down rookie contributors and give out their do not draft list. Download and subscribe to Fantasy Football Today wherever you get your podcasts.